Welcome to this edition of Lift Every Voice. Lift Every Voice is a program of the Louisville branch NAACP through which we attempt to keep our community informed as to the items and issues on which the NAACP is working, and they vary across a broader spectrum. As you know, the mission of the NAACP is to ensure the educational, economic, political rights of all individuals, and particularly fighting against racial discrimination. Last week, or on the last show, we were talking about the student assignment plan in Jefferson County. The focus was primarily on the history of student assignment, how it came about, who is involved, what is involved, and how we arrived at where we are now. Today, what I would like to talk about is what the ongoing current study and plan regarding a new student assignment plan for Louisville and Jefferson County. I'm fortunate today to have with me two distinguished individuals who represent the NAACP. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Raoul Cunningham, who is the president of the Louisville branch NAACP and also NAACP National Board member. Also with us is Ms. Michelle Patrick, retired educator and chair of the Louisville branch NAACP Education Committee. With these individuals today, we're going to have a discussion around student assignment, what we know as of today, and we're going to look at what kinds of issues and things that we as a community ought to be thinking about, because an informed community is the best educated community. First of all, let me welcome both Raoul and Michelle to this show. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, and so we'll start off by sort of having a general discussion of what's been proposed. I know that the student assignment plan or the documentation that's out there is pretty, I won't say bare bones. It isn't fully fleshed out at this point in time. And I'd like to know from each of you, what has been your general reaction to what has been proposed?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I've looked at it, trying to study it, trying to make sure that I understand it. However, because it's not complete, there are many questions that I have from two perspectives. One, my personal and individual perspective, and as president of a NAACP unit, what should be the position of the organization? And at that point, based on what we have, I don't think we can say.
Okay, Michelle, your general response.
Well, first of all, I want you to know that I am an educator. I retired from JCPS. And the idea of giving parents choice for the first time and working in a school situation, I was a teacher at Mazik Middle. I was ecstatic about that. But when you get to the layers underneath it, I just have some questions and some concerns. To kind of rear off for a moment, I talked to a young man who was one of my students, and we were just talking about successes. And he said to me, this was a young Black male, he said to me, Miss Patrick, I always wanted to be in a magnet program, but I thought you had to be rich to be in there. So that caused some concern that whatever our programs had been, the magnet program had been years ago, it did what it was supposed to do. It made our kids not think they were worthy to be in there. So I have a little intrepidation, but I'm happy that they're talking about choice for African American children for the first time.
Okay. So, the primary objective of the student assignment plan, which was implemented back in 1975, was really for desegregation of educational system and to hopefully equalize educational system. If integration and desegregation is an objective to be achieved by the educational system, based on what you see now, will this plan achieve it, or will it resegregate schools?
I think that the dual resides will definitely, because of the housing pattern and the desire of a lot of parents to have the kids closer to home, I think will definitely cause a resegregation of those schools.
Michelle?
Uh, in the conversation, I was on a forum with the superintendent about 3 weeks ago, and that well, they didn't use those terms. They didn't use deseg or integration or reseg. But what was used were the questions that parents were asking is, how can we ensure that our children will be able to attend other schools if they should want to? Um, I need you to understand that it's going to have to be a commitment, I believe, on both the schools, various community organizations like the NAACP to make sure that that does not happen. I think we have to be involved in uh, the grassroots of planning that to ensure that it doesn't happen. I hope that it doesn't, and I hope that some parents will look at this as an opportunity to move their child to a specific program that their child wants to be in and be successful in. But there is that possibility, but we as the NAACP need to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay. No, one of the things probably to give better context to this discussion, and again, this is a follow on to the program that was done a week ago, is that when we talk about student assignment for purpose of the audience and for folks who have not been involved, we're talking about a plan that includes primarily two major focus by JCPS. One focus is to reform the magnet school, which Michelle talked about earlier. And that means, and the focus there is as it relates to magnet school. Once a student is accepted into a magnet school program, that school owns that child. On the current situation, if a discipline or some other problem comes up, the school has the option of sending that student to another school. Under this plan, is the magnet schools wouldn't have that kind of opportunity. It wouldn't happen. The other thing with magnet schools is that the selection or the placement of students in magnet schools would be done out of the central office, not out of individual schools, which is a way of bringing about better equity. At least that's the perception and understanding. The second piece, which is a major piece, and why we're here today, is creating what they call dual resides. So it means that if a student lives in West Louisville, that student would have two choices in regards to school that he or she would attend. This is for middle school and high school. The high school the student would choose would be Shawnee High School. The middle school that a student would choose would be a new middle school to be built on which they're now working. And it gives a choice. It's safe to say, not more, I guess it's a reality, that for since 1975, African American students in West Louisville have carried the burden of student school desegregation and what is taking place across there. As we look at this plan and we think about it, what should be the objectives for students in West Louisville? We talk about proximity to school, quality academics. The question is, how do you balance those two? Either one of you.
I'm gonna let the educator go first.
Well, when we look at it, I'm looking at your question and I'm thinking about the proximity and quality education and how we just have to make sure that that occurs. We know as far as proximity, our children ride the bus more than any other child going back and forth to school early in the morning, and which has an effect on their academics. They're tired, they get up early, and they're tired. But I think we have to, as when I say we, I'm not just talking about the NAACP. I'm talking about mamas and grandmamas, all of us that have children around us. We have to make sure that that balance is there. I have to make sure that as a parent, if I had a child in school, I would be so concerned about that curriculum, and I would be so concerned about who was um, delivering the instruction to ensure that my child was getting what it needed. And so we have to do that in order to balance. We have to communicate with the schools and the teachers and the principal to make sure that that concurs. It's not like one person, an island to itself. We have this gift, this child that we're all pouring into in order for that child to be successful. So we have to balance the two. And one of the questions that I did ask at the forum with the superintendent was, if I lived in the West End and you're giving me a choice, why don't I have a choice to attend any magnet school in the West End? That wasn't discussed. I didn't get an answer from him, but I got an answer from one of his uh I guess his resource people. It just didn't get clear to me. I believe that if I live in the West End with the dual reside, regardless of whatever my zip code is, I should have an opportunity to attend any magnet in the West End if that's what I should choose to do. And as a parent, so hopefully, in our discussion with the NAACP and JCPS, we'll get a clearer understanding if that's possible. So that will give us that balance of proximity,
Right.
and we know that quality academics, we know that that's about instruction, curriculum, and who's in assessment. That's what that's all about.
I really think it's going to be a difficult achievement to get a great balance. I think at one point, and I think that the primary objective ought to be quality academics rather than exactly where the student lives. I think we have got to ensure that our children get quality academics.
When we talk about quality academics and what students are able to give, people often talk about equitable education, and I guess for me, one way in which to demonstrate that is that if you're when I was a kid, we used to jump the fence at the football stadium to go watch games and never pay. And some of us were taller than others, and some could jump up and get over. Others had to be helped up. So if you assume that you got maybe a 6 foot wall, and one of the students is 6 feet, one is 5'11", one is 4 feet six. Creating equity isn't giving each one a stand of 3 feet that they can stand on to be able to see over the fence. It means that the one that's 4 feet six requires more support than the one who's 5 feet, and less support than the one who is 6 feet. In terms of trying to create equitable education in our school system, how do we do that, Michelle? How do we ensure that our students are in fact getting equitable education?
Well, I also work for the Department of Education, and one of my jobs was to go around to ensure that there was equity in the schools. It used to be a time that there was a document called a school improvement document,
Mhm.
and it was used to ensure that if I did something in the poorest communities, I would be doing the same thing in the richest community. And I think also we need to have, there was a place in the Reform Act that said you would have a committee of people who, through all walks of life, to go in the schools to see if those schools are equitable. And I don't recall it ever happening. And that's the only way I believe that it can be done. It has to be a certain criteria there that says this school shall do this, this, and this, and then be evaluated by that process if it's not happening. And then you have to know what is equitable. What is equitable? And that's a question that I've raised all the time. But I think you need to have a set of criterias to decide on what you believe is equitable, because as Mr. Cunningham may see something that I don't see, or vice versa with you may see something that I don't see. So I think we need to have criteria set down to determine what's equitable.
You know, to go ahead, Ralph.
Who sets the criteria?
Well, at that time, it was educators that set up the criterias that came through at the Department of Education. They did. And like I said, we had a checklist that we would look through, and it was based on educators who had uh, done different studies to decide on, especially if it was something about black children. There was a lot of people, I can't think of the woman's name now, it's been so long ago, but she was known for working with children of diverse backgrounds. I can't think of this. They had her there, but she was known for that. And she gave input into this document to make sure. I personally traveled all up in Eastern Kentucky because there was an issue of white males not going off to college and not feeling that education was important up there in your coal mines and places like that. So when I went into schools, I had to see what things they were doing in order to be more inclusive of white males being a part of the educational process. So that's how it was determined.
There have been long-standing racial inequities in schools, and it's been very well documented. Two of the primary focus areas that have contributed to that has been limited resources and low expectations. Those have been two of the primary drivers. So as we look at the student assignment program, and we look at how we focus on quality academics, should we also not be looking at those, how we impact the limited resources in schools, particularly if Shawnee and the new middle school are going to be heavily concentrated with African American kids, high poverty in terms of going on. How do we factor in and address those two issues?
Again, I just feel like and I mean us as parents or whatever, we need to go into schools and ensure that our kids are getting what they need. The question that goes in my mind all the time is, how is this long range plan going to prepare my child for college? What do you have there? And looking at the programs that JCPS is offering, uh, for what is it, the aviation program for
Right,
Shawnee.
right.
Then there is the middle school program. Now I asked this question, and they I believe he said no, that was not the case. But I was asking some questions about the programs that are being offered, and in his discussion, because I thought what was happening is, if I went to the new middle school and I take all the X amount of programs that they have, I would be it's like it would be a feeder school to the high school. So we need to make sure that the programs that are being offered have certified, qualified people to do those programs. That's number one and important, because I can say I have a program down here and I don't have the people equipped to do the program. So we need to make sure that we have teachers and staff in there that can do what needs to be done. I'm not speaking of just Shawnee, but the Grace James School. They have GE technology down there. I remember seeing. But my question is, who's been trained in order to provide the knowledge base that those young girls need in order to be successful in whatever program that is? So We have to make sure that, and that comes back from like people just coming, looking, viewing, having a committee that does that. That's what we have to do.
You saying that brings the kind of, approximately 36% of the students in JCPS are African American.
Mhm.
36%. 13% of the teachers are African Americans. And as we talk about how to change things, three sort of focus areas for closing the gap of fixing disparities are more Black teachers, a culturally competent curriculum, which I think you referred to some, Michelle,
Yeah.
and consistent help. How do we build into the student assignment plan those things?
Well, it's gonna take work on the whole community to help. I know you all are aware of the Revive 502 with the learning hubs and all of that. I happened to be at a meeting the other night with that, and it was very interesting that I did not know that all the communities around, and especially religious-based education programs, are around helping. So it's going to take organizations to help. It's going to take people like me to after this pandemic is over to volunteer and work with kids. It's going to I think we just cannot idly sit back and hope that things will work out. We're all going to have to be active with making sure that our children get what they need. I don't know if I answered that question for you, but that's what I hear. And and then when it comes to selecting teachers, we really, as an organization at NAACP, we need to ask, why is it you can't find African American teachers or administrators? What is it that we can do to help you all find those individuals to come in the schools to help with raising the number of Black teachers and administrators in the school? I remember years ago, they used to have various programs. I don't even think they have them going anymore, that looked for minority teachers and, minority teachers to come in and get hired. I don't even know if they do that anymore. So I've been away from them.
That question has been asked over and over again. Uh, I think minority teachers or teachers of color is one aspect of it. We've got to encourage persons who are enrolled to go into the teaching profession. At one point, before desegregation, teaching profession teachers was were one of the professions that we had that we could easily go into. That is no longer true. Along with minority teachers would be adequate resources or increased financial resources, increased programs that will help and benefit minority students to achieve. I don't think there is one fit all situation or fit all aspect. And I think we have to encompass all. And we have to hold the school board or JCPS accountable in terms of resources, hold them accountable for increased minority teachers recruitment and hiring.
We're talking, and most people, when we talk about the student assignment plan, it is a focus on African American students in West Louisville and the school that they attend. And they're now, talking about enhancing Shawnee and a new middle school. But a significant number of African American students will not necessarily attend and do not attend those schools. What should we be doing to ensure that all African American students get a full and complete education and get the resources that they need?
Well, I have to go back to making sure that the curriculum is sound, that that the teachers that are there to teach the kids are sound,
Hmm.
competent, uh, and to make sure that there's an atmosphere in that building or that classroom for learning. And also help parents to become partners in the process. Um, you know, I have been it's worked in various schools where I have seen in part of my career where as parents of color were not welcomed, okay, unless there was a problem. We have to change the way we think, and I'm speaking of the schools have to, and educators have to change the way they think, and to know that in order for that child to have be successful, they have to be a partner with that school. I had someone to say to me, my child went crazy in middle school. And I just laughed and I said, but that's the time you need to be more involved, is when they in the middle years. A lot of parents think that, well, I got them through elementary, now they're in middle and high, I can just let it go. No, you need to be more intense in your working with your kid, going into the various programs, seeing what's going on. So we have to be partners with the school system, not adversarial, but partners, and say, this is my child. I want to see him go beyond 12th grade. What are you doing in this classroom? And it's okay to ask those kind of questions.
Okay.
um, I
Okay.
am concerned about his or her success. So I need to know what you're doing. And if some parents have some ideas or some things, the way they can help, then we need to open, the schools need to be open to allow those parents to come in and to help.
Okay.
I think that's the
We're
only way.
okay. We're getting to the end of our time. Raul, would you like to add anything to that?
I just want to say that organizations like the NAACP, we have got to monitor what's going on in the school, as well as don't wait until the scores come out, and then we need to be there at all times and to monitor what's going on in the schools.
Okay, as you say, this is a very broad, deep subject with a lot of nuances, a lot of questions to be raised, and we're at the end of our time. But what I would like to say to our audience and those who are listening to us is that the NAACP is out there working on your behalf, and if there are questions that you have about the student assignment plan, about schools, about education, and you're not getting those answers, you can come to the NAACP and share those with us. We got to be engaged in collecting as many community responses, community questions to this student assignment plan so that we make the best possible decision for our students. At this point, I'd like to thank our guests, Raoul Cunningham, President of Louisville Branch NAACP, and Michelle Patrick, retired educator and Education Committee Chair of the Louisville Branch NAACP. If we're going to make a difference, we've got to hear from you. And you can do that by contacting the NAACP, by calling our office at 502-776-7608. The NAACP needs to hear from you. And we'd like to thank you for being with us and engaging with us today. And if you want to make a change, if you want to bring about change, we must lift every voice and be heard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The NAACP was founded in 1909 with the mission to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. It is said that the NAACP is the largest and oldest, the baddest and boldest, the most loved and most hated, the most feared and revered, the most cussed and discussed civil rights organization, and recently its brand was recognized as the most admired organization in America. A heavy recognition to live up to, but that is exactly what the organization does.